Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is for you. Today we are looking at the Microtech Currahee. This is the single edge version, serial number 5177. This one's from 06 of 22, M390 steel. We're going to be looking at the, whoa, I'm throwing stuff around. The holster, the sheath, the knife, how that works together, what I think about the knife, and etc. Like I just did with the Microtech SBD review I just filmed, I'm going to start with the sheath because, like I said in the other review, with a fixed blade especially, if you have a bad sheath, you're not going to want to carry the knife a ton. It makes it really frustrating if you don't like the sheath, and you're probably going to end up just putting it on a shelf somewhere. With a pocket knife, you got a clip usually, and you can always take the clip off if you don't like it and just find a nice pocket for it or a slip cover or somewhere nice to tuck it. With a fixed blade knife, the sheath is really important because it's going to go on your hip or wherever you're putting it, and if this doesn't work, the whole thing's kind of annoying, and then you have to try and find a replacement, an aftermarket, or a custom-made option. With this sheath itself, aside from the clip, which I'm going to talk about in a second, the sheath is fantastic. It is Kydex with that cool carbon fiber looking finish. These rivets start as black, and then over time they will wear to show the bronze color of them, and that works fine. It has a nice flared out thumb spot for pushing out. If you didn't have it on a belt or something, that gives a little something for your thumb to push on. The SOCOM Alpha Mini and the SOCOM Alpha Full Size also come with that, which is handy with a smaller handle. This one has a nice large handle, so you don't really need that, especially with the clips retaining it to your belt. You don't need that. You get good purchase on that big handle. Also comes with a lanyard, which can help if you miss the handle. You can just grab onto that, which for some knives are really handy, which is why I've added this to some knives, because it gives a little something else. Some knives don't have that little thumb port. The SBD and the SBK don't come with that, but if you have a good clip, it doesn't matter. So that's that out of the way. The retention comes right out of the top area, right in this, which is right around this handle, and it loops around this corner. That's where the majority of the retention's coming from, is grabbing or hugging this radius here. And the retention, nothing to complain about there. Nice and stiff, works good. So going from there, this one doesn't have, I actually just noticed this because I was looking at that on the other review. This one doesn't have a drain point, which is kind of odd. I'm surprised actually. I didn't even notice that until I started recording. This one has a little hole for fluids, small dust and stuff to fall out of your holster or clip. This one has it. This one just has a little hole drilled right there for that. This one doesn't have either of those. Oh, there's a hole. Okay, I'm not crazy. So they did think of that. There's a little liquid point there for that to fall out. If dust gets in there, it's not going to fall out as easy as just having a through hole in the bottom. But that's cool. That works fine for liquids and stuff. Now going on to the clip. It comes with this on this side. This is junk. I would recommend highly that you take that off and get rid of it. I just had it sitting around because I didn't see a point throwing it away. This one, it's supposed to spring itself back out to lock. As you might have saw, I just opened it. This is supposed to spring out. There's a little pin that popped out from somewhere. I don't even remember where the pin was supposed to go. I think actually what happened is this pin backed out because it's not in there fantastic. And you can see it's sticking out farther here than it is on this end. There's a gap there where it sinks in farther, and it wasn't engaging with the wall of this, and the spring got sideways or something, and it came out of location and the springs popped out. I think I found the springs at one point, but I didn't care about fixing it because I don't trust these. And I noticed that was going to be an issue right away because I saw that pin was lopsided, sticking out this way more than that. And I knew it was going to be an issue, and eventually the day came when it was an issue. and it literally only took like a month or two for that to happen. I mean, otherwise, these are kind of okay. You have these standoffs that are movable if you were putting it on some sort of like a backpack strap or something and you need to change the thickness of whatever you're clipping it to. You have multiple location holes if you want to tilt it at different angles for any reasons. But otherwise, I do not trust these. I don't like them. They're also kind of thick and bulky. I just don't like them. I'd recommend you get rid of them. What I did was I got these from Tandy Leather. You can definitely find nicer stuff. I put these on there like so. And I just took this one off to show you something in a second. But these work perfectly fine. They are flashy, but these go behind my belt or this is my show side. So most of this is hidden 90% of the time. If it were shown like that, it would be a little flashy, which theoretically could be an issue. But if I'm ever in a situation where I'm actually trying to go covert for some crazy reason, I would probably just put tape over them and hide them a little better. Or just use a paracord and tie it to my belt if I really was actually going commando or Rambo style. These clips work fine. They're stainless steel, but I did have to drill these out because they were too small. And stainless steel is not fun to drill. It really burns up your drill bits. And if you don't have a good rigid drill press, it's really annoying. You can get plastic options. I also got these from Tandy Leather, but I also had to drill these out. Plastic, I worry a little bit more about it breaking, but obviously it's black, so there's no flashiness. And they're much easier to drill. You don't even need a drill press. You can just take a hand file and open that hole up a bit. So they do come with hardware holding the original clip on. I think this one came with 2 bolts holding it on. There was just 2 here, I believe, holding the clip on. And it has a proprietary hardware head on one end. And did you hear that? I was cracking my back. So it's proprietary on one end, and the other end is a Phillips. Now, you don't really need to buy their proprietary hardware because a lot of their washers, I don't think this one was factory, but that might have been a factory spacer, that little rubber thing. That adds enough tension that once you get it tight, it's going to stay put for quite a while. And instead of using the proprietary hardware, I literally just take my shirt and press into it, and then you can loosen and tighten, and the shirt provides a little friction without tearing your thumb up, and that works fine. Some people even use a little bit of duct tape instead of a shirt, and that probably works a little better, probably get it a little tighter. But anywho, this is a little washer with a rubber piece. I don't know, I don't remember if this was from Microtech or if this is one I just had around that I used for that, but it works totally fine. And once you get it snug, the rubber helps keep the tension. So I think that's the majority of the clip. Sits nice and flat, with especially with this. With this, it hung out quite a bit more, like I want to say more than twice. I know up here it's thicker than the bottom, but it's more than twice as thick personally. These don't carry as nice, so these work great. Going back to the rest of the knife, speaking of the lanyard, this lanyard's totally fine. I'm going to keep it on there in case I'm camping and I happen to need some rope, but it did come with this bead that was on here, and I cut that off because this thing is heavy. It's solid. There's a through hole, but it's solid and it's heavy. I mean, if you threw this at someone, you'd hurt them. But basically where it was on there, if I'll just hold it loose. But anytime you were chopping, this would swing up and smack your knuckles. And that was so annoying. Anytime I was out using it on limbs or trees or whatever, it just kept swinging up and smacking my knuckles. And this thing's so heavy, it actually hurt. I mean, I don't know what purpose this serves. It's so heavy and big. If you know maybe some history behind why they added this or what you would use it for in a survival situation, besides, I'm not even going to go there. I don't know. If you have an idea of this, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I can go grab something else to show it as an example. And I'm on the other side of my room talking to myself. And I'm coming back. So this is a knife I added a lanyard to because this is such a small little handle protrusion. That gives me a little something for my back fingers to grab onto to pull it out. This is the Microtech Les George SBR. It's a Les George collaboration with Microtech. Nice little knife. Also comes with a good clip. This is very similar to this stainless clip I have here. Very, very similar. But this one's part of the leather holster sheath. And it's actually by case makers that do stuff for like cameras and such. So just this was like $100 upgrade for this knife. But this, I put a little skull that came with what was it, a handkerchief, and I just threw it on there for fun, but you totally don't need it. So besides beads and lanyard beads looking cool, I don't know why you would want something big and bulky like this that's gonna smack your knuckles and add weight. It was also hanging low enough. If you see where this is at, I don't think it was hitting sometimes that would pop around the corner right here, and this hangs low enough to hit the sheath, and while you're walking you'll hear that. So that was just, I don't know why they did that. Maybe you can make an improvised weapon, put that on the rope and swing it around and smack people in the head. I don't know. Maybe that's what it's for. But I totally took that off, and then I just snugged them up a bit, burnt the ends, and I left the lanyard as is in case I need it. So going off from there, this is a drop point. They also come with a Tonto, a double edge that's basically this length, with a shape very similar to the Microtech SBD. You'll have that shape there, but you won't have the full length on the back. They have more of this like a thumb ramp on the back, but I think it's a little larger on the double edge versions I've seen. And so you'll have a little more than half this length of double edge on the back, and then the normal plain edge on the front of that double edge version. And I've seen those versions with serrations, also plain edge, also like a half serration where it's serrated here, and the rest is plain. So there's quite a few variations of this blade. There's also Tonto, which would just be a tank because this thing's thick and beefy. So Tonto would just be a monstrously strong blade, but we'll get into measurements in a bit. There's quite a few different color variations I've seen green, tan, black, obviously. And for some reason, I want to say I saw purple at one point. I've also seen camo, I believe. This is not a knife that comes available very often. I was into Microtech knives for around a year and a half or so before I even saw these become available. They'll do batches of stuff. So they'll make a bunch of these and then shelf it for a while and make other knives, and then they'll come back to the design. This is a serial number 5177, and I imagine maybe these just aren't as good selling. This one's 1714, so it's a newer model. They've been making these for a while, but I don't see them a ton. Going to the name, I guess, since I'm thinking about it, Currahee is a Cherokee word, which means stands alone, which is pretty cool. It's also the name of a mountain in some ranges. I can't remember the name. If you look on, I didn't see this knife on Microtech's website, surprisingly, but if you go to like bladehq.com or something, they'll have some details on that. A little bit of the story. It was designed for a SEAL, like a Navy SEAL boat team 20, if I'm recalling correctly. I literally just read it, but I have potato brain. So it is, as far as I know, it's designed for military guys, and some military guys do use it, which isn't totally surprising because it's just really like over-engineered to just not break. If you broke one of these, I'd be so impressed. And while I'm thinking on that, I guess I'll start talking about the handle. This has the best handle, actually, of any of my fixed blade knives right now, even my machetes. I can go grab a tops knife, which is the closest thing I think to this, which it's not even close really. This is a Tops Punisher. This is the closest thing to just having an over-engineered beefy knife that would be so impressive if you managed to break it. This grip's not even as great as that. This is, I think, engineered for someone wearing gloves, but I had to radius corners down here and up here because I was digging into my fingers and creating hot spots when I was using it without gloves. And I don't necessarily have lady hands, so this is not the nicest for stuff like that. But this, gloves or no, this is so comfortable. It's radiused all the way around. They're not getting too fancy with anything. It's just smooth corners. And I have large hands that I usually wear extra large gloves with. And that's just fantastic. Super great handle. The only hot spots I could potentially see is this hardware protrudes a little bit. It's a little bit of a sharp corner, not necessarily sharp, but you feel it. And I think if anything, that would add a little extra grip, especially if you're wearing gloves. That fabric would just sink in there and give you a little bit extra grip. Visually, you might see a little bit of that porosity or that grip. It almost looks like grip tape on a skateboard for the handle. So just that plain material on its own is really grippy. So it's just great. I don't have another fixed blade that has a handle like this. I wish this was like twice as long, like basically a short sword, because that handle just makes me want to just destroy wood, trees, and just get crazy with it. So I wish they had like a twice as long version. That would be so cool. Like the Microtech also makes the, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the name. Oh man. It has a blade shape very similar to this. It's just longer. It's actually, I don't know. Go to Microtech's website, and if you click on products and go to the core series and click on fixed, you'll see it on there. Oh, it's the Arbiter, Microtech Arbiter, Arbiter. And that's sort of it's like a Bowie shape, and then they sharpen this back edge, I believe, at the top. So it's gnarly. If you look, I want one of those. I just haven't forked up the money for one yet. But that's a very similar version to this, just longer. I don't think it's as thick as far as I know, but it does have a different handle. It's closer to this sort of handle without the fuller, but I'm talking about something I don't own right now. But if you look at pictures, you'll see what I'm getting at. So I think that's enough of the handle. You do have some protrusion of the slab of full tang here going there. If you ever had to smack anything, theoretically a window or a face, you could do that. A lot of room for the lanyard loop here. So if you even wanted to put like a strap, like something you would see in a backpack through there, and attach something completely different than this, you could. Maybe even a wrist strap so you don't lose it, something like that. There's enough room in there to do some stuff. These are the proprietary hardware's screws, and I've seen people criticizing that, especially for something that's for military use. It's like, why would you put proprietary hardware on something that you may need to work on in the field? But to be honest, I've heard a lot that Microtech uses red Loctite on their threads for stuff. And with something like this, where chances are you're never going to be taking this handle off or never going to need to, they probably red Loctited it and torqued it down, and I'm not too worried about those coming loose. I'm pretty confident that they did their job on that one. Moving up to the blade, full thickness of the slab all the way to up here makes it really strong. You do have the thumb ramp here that I talked about already with some texturing for grip. They somewhat radiused this corner right there, you can see, but the top is still flat with just that little like chamfer deal going on to the point up there, which makes it a little more piercy if you had to stab an ammo can or something. Lots of room for the choil. So as you're sharpening, you're not going to have to deal with this material getting in the way, which you have on some cheaper knives. You don't really have room for a finger there. I guess you could if you wanted to, not that you would ever need to. But there's space there for stuff. This is the factory edge. I have not resharpened this. I haven't needed to. It's still pretty sharp. It still grabs my fingernails really good. While I'm speaking about the edge, I'm gonna see if I can focus on it right there. If you see that little chip, I don't even remember using that portion of the blade. Typically I'm chopping back here, as you might see the wear. So I don't even remember being that rough on that corner, and it did chip. So maybe there's just a slight realistically it was probably me, but I was probably just using it on wood, so I wouldn't expect to see a chipping like that soon. So that was a little disappointing because it just surprised me at one point. I was like, where did that come from? But que sera sera, I don't mind. I don't really care. It's such a beefy knife. That's what it's for. It's for getting abused. So a little chip in the blade just adds to the character for me. You do have this little swoosh in there. I actually have another knife that's similar to this, but not as, it has more of an aggressive swoosh. I'll go grab that real quick. Once again, I'm stepping away from the camera talking to myself. I love you, you love me, we're a happy family. This is the Cold Steel Spartan. Much more aggressive swoosh than this, as you can see, but still very similar. It's like a parang machete design. Very similar sizes, actually. I've never held these two together. This is the Cold Steel is actually a little longer, just like an inch longer, or like a quarter inch, not even. This is much thicker, but they're very close in thickness even. Obviously, this is a folder. I'll do a review of this someday. I have two of these. I carried this one for years. This thing's a tank. But much more aggressive swoosh. That's going to be harder to sharpen. This will be easier to sharpen, but still not. I really don't foresee problems sharpening this. I haven't sharpened this one before, and I've carried it for years, and it still works. Still a usable edge that I'm not worried about. And I imagine that will be a little annoying to sharpen if I get to that point someday. I might have someone do that for me if I get to that point. But I don't carry this one much anymore. This is more camping. Something I can beat on at the campsite. I also carry this one primarily for camping, or if I'm going out in the country, not necessarily camping. I've already said this a few times before in my last video, but the SBD and the Silcom Alpha Mini, these are my two most carried fixed blades. This is more my weekend one. Sometimes I carry at work. This one I carry every day at work. And this one's more if I don't mind carrying heavy and I'm going out and getting crazy. And I want something that's a tank that I'm not worried about abusing. Well, I think that's enough on the edge. It's maybe slightly larger bevel on this end than this end, but just the slightest. So realistically, the sharpening is fantastic on there. Nothing to complain about really there. I just got machinist eyeballs that get nitpicky with stuff. I think that's good on the blade. You can see there's scratches and stuff. Originally, I thought this was a Cerakote, but I don't think I would have been able to beat up Cerakote that quickly. I want to believe that Cerakote is tougher than that, unless I've just really been rough on this thing, which I really haven't. But maybe you can hear that. Maybe you can hear that. I actually managed to scratch through whatever that coating is. I don't even remember what I was doing that caused that. But you know, with knives like this, you just do stuff and you're like, I don't care. You just do it. You just get crazy with it. Even back here, there's a little bit of removal of the coating. So I don't think it's Cerakote, because Cerakote is basically a rock coating that's really beefy. Or maybe, once again, maybe they just didn't do a good job on this specific coating. But I didn't see any information on that online. I know they do, you can get these Cerakoted. I've seen tan ones and green that I remember seeing the word Cerakote used on them. I just don't think this one is one of them. So maybe it's more just a cheap black coating. And someday if I want to, I could just have someone strip it and put something unique on there. Obviously I'll lose this, the serial number and the branding on there, which is okay if I get to that point. But I like character, so when it gets beat up, especially like with a satin blade, or let's look at this one. Besides the rub marks from the Kydex, like, you don't see what you've done with it. You can't tell I've been carrying this for a year and a half or more, or 2 years or whatever. This is a 2022 model. So when you can tell it's been used, it's kind of cool, because then you pull it out and people are like, whoa, what did you do to that thing? So that's kind of the fun of black knives, or knives with black coating. But also, if you like your knives looking pretty, might not be so nice, because if someday you go to sell it and they're like, oh wow, you beat on this thing, it's a little more obvious versus pulling out a satin blade and being like, oh yeah, that's pretty, I'll take it. That just depends on who you're selling it to and how much they know about what they're looking at. Well, I think I've gone over the coating, the handle, the lanyard, the sheath, the blade shape. I think we'll start getting into some measurements. I'll pull up what I've written on it so far. It is the Microtech Currahee. This is 0622 model, serial number 5177. It is the M390 blade steel. I feel like, so price-wise, I wrote 300 to 340. I was just looking at Blade HQ's website. I feel like I paid like $280 for this. But that was from a shop where I knew the owner and they were cool people. And this is a pretty plain Jane model. So I feel like I was under 300, but that's kind of your ballpark. You might be able to get under 300, especially if you're getting used. You're going to be looking more at 200 something. So that's your ballpark. And on their websites, I saw composite polymer handle. I'm pretty sure it's not a G10. This is G10, and they look much different. G10 is a glass-filled polymer resin, whereas this just said composite polymer handle. So it's definitely tough. Like, I've used this, and it doesn't look like it at all. So it's good stuff. It's good texture. More grippy than this in the plain spots. This is more smooth, the G10. And G10 will also get a little polish as you carry it more and use it. Your hands will smoothen it out and give it a little shine. This doesn't look like that at all. So it's good, tough stuff, whatever it is. 9.8 inches overall length, 4.5 inch blade length, 5.3 handle length, 13.35 ounce weight. It is pretty heavy. I've heard people say this one was surprisingly heavy. This is probably twice the weight. Actually, I can actually look at that and see if that's twice the weight, just for comparisons, just for funsies. This is 6.67 ounces. So this is a little more than twice the weight of this. I don't know if they're including this, because this is, I'm not good at knowing weights just by touching it, but this is easily an ounce or somewhere in that ballpark. So it's a big, beefy, heavy knife. If you're the kind of person that likes to carry ultralight, this is probably not the knife for you. But if you're the kind of person that wants something that's for sure not going to break and that's just overbuilt, something you can do whatever with, this is more for that. Like if you're planning on prying open doors or prying open cars or ammo cans, and then batoning wood, even though this isn't quite as long as I'd want for batoning wood. This is the kind of thing I feel like I could throw anything at and not care about too much. So those are the numbers. Let's go to blade thickness. I don't remember if I showed you this on the clip when I was talking about it a second ago. This is the proprietary hardware that comes with it. It has a Phillips head, proprietary head. I already showed you that, but this is the measurement of the hardware for the clip, 0.2193. So if you're getting a clip, you want this to be able to fit in whatever pre-drilled holes it has, unless you're okay with doing low working. Sorry, I should have. I don't think I measured that. I did in my SBD video earlier, but blade thickness 0.202, 0.202, very close to a 1/4 inch. Back here even 0.202, so that's pretty freaking thick, 1/4 inch. I have this written down somewhere, but I'm just for funsies want to measure this one. 0.25. This one's actually a 1/4 inch. This one's a little thicker, but it's also quite a bit longer. That's the Tops Punisher. So that's the blade thickness. We'll measure the thickness behind the edge while I was looking at the tool. It's not going to be very thin. I'm just curious what it comes out to. Like 39 thousandths behind the edge, which actually, this one came out maybe 5 thousandths. This is Microtech SBD. This one came out maybe 5 thousandths thicker behind the edge. So this does have a little slicier of an edge compared to this, which I'm a little surprised for, but it's just minorly slicier. This one tapers up pretty quickly and it goes to full thickness. I don't think that has any, it's just a straight angle. Someone was nice enough to drop a comment and explain how I was misusing terms on compound grinds and the such, and I apologize. You can look up, just Google type of knife grinds, and you'll probably see example photos of whether it's tapered, just straight down, the different blade shapes. People interchange terms too, especially for blade styles. They'll call this, someone might call it a praying style or a drop point or a clip point. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't get too up in a bunch about that. So that's the thickness, edge measurement. Let's look with this guy at some stuff. Some thousandths worth of junk in there. All right, thickness back here. 1.937, almost 2 inches there. And then if I go to the top of this chopping point, about 1.416, and then in the middle 1.54. So it tapers up slightly and then goes to about 2 inches. So there's about a ½ inch difference from here to here, of course, with that being in there. And looking at the handle thickness, I'm going to go right on the hardware, 0.868. If I go off the hardware, 0.774. So just with that measurement, and visually you can see that that hardware steps out a little bit from the handle. And I believe, just looking at it, that the handle thickness is the same all the way through, and it is. So there's no, this is flat, there's no waviness going on. It's just a flat straight handle all the way back. I'll look at the thickness back here, a little more than 1.25 inches. Right here where your front finger's at, 1.03. Tapers up a little bit for your other fingers, just under 1.25 inches, and a little more than 1.25 inches right here. Tapers down again, and there's that. I think I already did this one, this protrusion here, 1.88. Then we'll look at the overall length. I'll look at the blade length here. From the website, I saw 4.5, but those numbers have come out much different than what I measure. 4.38. So even with this one, the website was about a 1/4 inch, said it was a 1/4 inch longer than what I was measuring. Maybe they're measuring back at this choil to the tip. Maybe they're using a height gauge and getting more accurate than I am. I don't know, but I'm getting smaller measurements than most of what I've seen on the website. But still, a little under 4, a little more than 4.25, 4.34. It's a decent length. And then we'll look at the handle, where your hand's going to be part, around 4.5 inches. Like I said, I wear an extra large glove. My hand fits perfectly in there. There's even some more room back here if you just have monstrous hands. Let's look at overall length. I'm gonna go right back to the stock here. I'm getting 10 inches and 25 thousandths. This is saying 9.8. So I'm getting it a little longer than that. Just a little longer than that. But whatever. Basically 10 inches, basically. Heavy tank of a knife, almost a 1/4 inch thick, 0.2 thick. I don't know what else I can measure for you. The gap here, where it goes from the flat stock to the taper, about 3/4 of an inch, all the way up until here. It tapers back a little. Yeah, just barely. It goes more to about 1/2 inch gap there. And that gives you a really strong tip because there's basically full stock material here, and then it drops out to the point. So that gives you a really strong, rigid tip, especially with that little, it goes from chamfer to blade edge, and then there's that point there that's a little thicker than the rest. That gives you a tough tip. You can do some aggressive stuff with this, and I wouldn't be worried about breaking a tip. The only knife that I have that I think would have a stronger tip is the Tops Punisher, once again, which I already did a review of. And it's basically full stock right up until there. And this thing's just a tank. I'm not at all worried about breaking a tip on this thing. Either of these, realistically. While I'm talking about tips, I'm curious what this looks like. But very similar. This looks longer. From that drop point. It's definitely a thinner blade stock, and yeah, it's a little longer farther back from the point. This would have a stronger tip than this, being thicker steel and a little closer up with that full thickness, but very similar blade grinds. Very similar. Interesting comparison. I never held these two together until this video, but they're very similar. This is like the fixed blade version. Well, if you have any more questions on this knife, go ahead and ask me, and I'll drop them in the comments when I get a moment, and we'll go from there. If there's any other knives you've seen in my videos, my shorts, or anything like that you want a review of, go ahead and let me know. I haven't reviewed this one yet, the ProTech SBR. I haven't done the SBK yet. I haven't done any of my out the fronts yet. I have a small collection of their out the fronts, so I could do those too. I've got a couple other knives I haven't even shown on the channel, but there you go. Thanks for watching this far. You have a great day.